Students vanished in college. 8 months later, this is found in the forest. Part 1: The Disappearance. It was a quiet Friday evening in October when the first calls came in. Campus security at Stonemount College, an old liberal arts institution nestled in the heavily wooded hills of northern Vermont, received a report that 2 students, both seniors, had failed to return from a weekend hiking trip. They had signed out with the administration office, leaving a vague itinerary that included a loop trail through the Black Hollow Forest, a sprawling and isolated stretch of federally protected land bordering the college's northwest property line. The missing students were identified as Claire Halloway, a 21-year-old environmental science major from Albany, New York, and Elliot Decker, a 22-year-old philosophy student originally from Cincinnati. Both were well-liked, academically gifted, and known for their love of nature. Claire had led student conservation efforts on campus. Elliot was more reserved, introspective. He had recently taken an interest in the writings of Henry David Thoreau and was known to spend long hours alone in the woods, notebook in hand. When they didn't return by Sunday night, friends initially assumed they'd decided to camp an extra day. But by Monday morning, when neither student showed up for classes and their phones remained off, concern spread quickly. By Tuesday, a full search and rescue operation had begun. Helicopters buzzed low over the dense treetops. Dogs were brought in from 3 counties. Drones were deployed, as were volunteers, over 200 in total, including students, faculty, and locals familiar with the unforgiving terrain. No trace of them was found. No discarded equipment. No campfire remains. No footprints. Nothing. The only possible clue came from a forestry camera positioned near the forest's southern perimeter. It had captured a grainy still image dated 5:12 p.m. on the day of their departure, 2 figures walking side by side along an old overgrown trail. The girl, believed to be Claire, was carrying a red backpack. The boy wore a blue beanie and held a walking stick. Their backs were to the camera. They were walking deeper into the woods. And that was it. 8 months passed. The semester changed. Winter came and went. Claire and Elliot's names faded from the student bulletin boards, the candlelight vigils, the group chats. And then, on a humid June morning, a father and daughter hiking through a lesser-used branch of the Black Hollow Trail stumbled upon something. A rusted metal box. Half buried beneath pine needles and dirt. It was sealed tight with wire and electrical tape. The girl, a sophomore in high school, joked that it looked like something from a horror movie. The father, an off-duty state trooper, knew better. They called it in. Part 2: The Box. By the time state investigator Marla Trenholm arrived at the scene, the area had been cordoned off with police tape and a portable forensic tent was already erected over the find. The box, measuring roughly 14 inches long by 10 inches wide, was laid out on a plastic sheet beside a small stream bed. The immediate area smelled faintly of something chemical, bleach or acetone. There were flies. Marla crouched beside the box. A forensic tech, sweat rolling down the side of his neck, gestured toward it. "There's something organic inside. Possibly wrapped in plastic. Heavy," he said. "No immediate signs of blood, but it's not clean." They cut the tape and slowly unwrapped the lid. Inside, under layers of clear plastic sheeting, was a stack of Polaroids. Dozens of them. Each photograph was labeled on the back in faded ballpoint pen. Some had dates. Some had names. Some had only numbers, cryptic strings like 7A3 or R/5/N. One of the first photos they pulled showed a small wooden room with no windows. The walls were covered in what looked like student newspaper clippings, handwritten notes, and newspaper headlines, some torn in half. A lantern burned dimly in the background. On the floor, a girl was seated with her legs crossed, looking straight into the camera. It was Claire Halloway. Alive. Her eyes were red from crying. Part 3, The Photographs. Back at the State Lab in Montpelier, the contents of the box were catalogued meticulously. All 54 Polaroids were logged and scanned. Each was placed in a numbered evidence sleeve. Some photos were faded almost to nothing. Others were frighteningly crisp. In nearly every image, the same dim lantern glowed somewhere in the background, casting elongated shadows across the floor and walls. Claire appeared in 13 of the photographs. Elliot was in only 2. There were others. 3 unfamiliar faces, 2 male, 1 female, appeared in a handful of the later images. None of them matched missing persons reports from the last 5 years. Facial recognition software turned up nothing. Forensic analysis determined the images were genuine, not digitally altered. Several Polaroids had faint thumbprints on them, none matching known prints in the state or federal systems. Marla Trenholm studied the photos late into the night, each one telling part of an incomplete story. One showed Claire lying on a thin mattress with duct tape over her mouth, her hands free, eyes open. Another showed a close-up of a spiral-bound notebook with symbols drawn across 2 pages, geometric shapes, arrows, strange sigils not immediately identifiable. The most disturbing image was dated February 19 and depicted the mouth of a cave. A figure, heavily obscured by shadow, stood inside. Only part of a leg and an elbow could be seen clearly. But what was unmistakable, what chilled everyone in the room, was the detail along the rock wall just to the left of the figure. A streak of what appeared to be blood, smeared by fingers. That photo was labeled, "They let us eat once the snow melted." Part 4, The Journal. On the 4th day of the investigation, the forensic team made a discovery even more unsettling than the photos. Hidden beneath a false lining in the box was a small leather journal, partially water-damaged, with the initials ED scratched into the front cover. It had belonged to Elliot. Pages were torn and out of order, as if written under extreme stress. The handwriting was erratic, almost frenzied at points. Here is an excerpt from the journal, dated December 3. Claire stopped talking. "Won't eat the mushrooms I found. I think she thinks I'm poisoning her. I hear them moving at night, outside the walls. They're never loud, just enough to let us know they're watching. Sometimes the lights flicker. Sometimes they don't come on at all. When that happens, you pray you're not in the back room. I don't know how long it's been. I scratched days on the floor but they filled them in. They don't speak English. Or maybe they do. I'm not sure anymore. I had a dream where one of them told me, there is a price to memory. That didn't feel like a dream." Claire says she dreamed the same thing. The handwriting trailed off into a line that dipped across 2 pages. The last legible note in the journal was written in pencil, barely visible. "If someone finds this, we didn't die the way they think." Part 5, Campus Connections. Back at Stonemount College, news of the discovery spread like wildfire. Rumors circulated faster than the administration could manage them. Some claimed Claire had returned and was being held by the government. Others swore a faculty member had been arrested. Neither was true. The administration issued a bland statement about cooperation with state authorities and privacy for the families involved. Classes continued. But students whispered in hallways. Professors quietly took down old flyers. The dormitory where Claire had lived, Maple Hall, became a nightly pilgrimage spot for candlelight vigils and speculative podcasts. Marla had turned her attention to the college itself. She requested access to faculty emails, student records, building maintenance logs, and campus security footage. There was resistance, of course. Lawyers got involved. But eventually, she got what she needed. Buried in a facility work order from September 4, just a month before the students vanished, was a curious note. Auditory complaint from students in Maple Hall basement, says they hear knocking at night coming from the crawlspace. Investigated. Nothing found. RH. She found another note, logged 3 years earlier, almost identical in language. Then another. From 2007. And once more, in 1999. All from the same hall. Always the basement. Always the knocking. Part 6, The Crawlspace. The crawlspace beneath Maple Hall hadn't been accessed in years. When investigator Marla Trenholm arrived with a search warrant, the maintenance supervisor, a grizzled man in his 60s named Ray Harlan, refused to step inside. He handed her the rusted key and mumbled something about bad air down there. His expression was pale, jaw clenched. The hatch was hidden behind a false wall in the laundry room. Dust coated every surface. A strong chemical odor, not unlike ammonia, hit Marla as she descended the narrow metal ladder. The space was tight. No more than 3 feet high in most places. Dirt floor. Exposed brick foundation. Old wires dangled like cobwebs from beams. Her flashlight beam caught on something embedded in the earth, a row of short vertical sticks arranged in a circle. Inside the circle, dried animal bones. Squirrel. Bird. Possibly a rabbit. All cleanly picked. It wasn't until she scanned the far end of the space that she saw the cloth. A strip of red fabric, caught on a nail driven into a joist. It was part of a backpack. DNA testing would later confirm what she already suspected. It belonged to Claire. Part 7, Unsolved Histories. Over the next few weeks, Marla reopened 3 cold cases dating back nearly 4 decades, all tied to Stonemount College. 1979, freshman student Lena Braith, 18, vanished walking home from the library. Her body was never found. Her roommate told police Lena had been researching local indigenous burial mounds for an anthropology project. 1988, Charles Nels, 20, a psychology student, reportedly left campus one night after sending a strange letter to his professor. The letter mentioned dream experiments and hearing voices in the walls. He was never seen again. 1997, a campus custodian found a locked door in the subbasement of the now-demolished Rochester Hall. The door was covered in carvings, symbols similar to those seen in Eliot's journal. Before campus security could investigate, the door was sealed shut with concrete. No official record of what was behind it exists. All 3 cases shared eerie commonalities: proximity to forest edges, references to auditory hallucinations, and in 2 cases, missing journals or notebooks. But here's where it got stranger. Every single case had at least one connection to Professor Howard Rusk, a now-retired folklore and comparative religion lecturer. Rusk had taught at Stonemount from 1975 to 2006. He was known for his eccentric lectures and fascination with liminal spaces, thresholds between reality and myth. Students recalled that he often took classes into the forest for experiential learning. One former student, Daniel Fry, now in his 40s, agreed to speak with Marla. "I dropped out after sophomore year," he said. Rusk, he was always talking about how some places, especially old places, collect energy. He said the woods here were thin places, where time folds in on itself. When asked what he meant, Daniel hesitated. "He told us once, out in the woods, that Stonemount sits on a fault line, but not a geological one. He said certain places remember." Part 8, The VHS Tape. 3 weeks after the box was found, another anonymous package arrived at the Vermont State Police headquarters. It had no return address. Postmarked from Athens, Maine. Inside, an unlabeled VHS cassette, a small Polaroid of a dark-haired man in a red parka, and a hand-drawn map of the Black Hollow Forest with a red X near a dried-up stream bed. The VHS tape, when played, revealed grainy footage, time-stamped April 1996. A camera sits on the ground, angled upward. Leaves rustle. A man's voice is heard, whispering. "She's not dead. Not yet." They keep them different. Then silence. Then, the image of what looks like an underground room. Walls made of stacked stone. The floor is dirt. In the corner, bound with rope, is a figure too blurry to identify. The footage cuts suddenly to black. Investigators sent a team to the location marked by the red X. What they found was worse than expected. A concrete slab, half collapsed. Possibly a storm shelter. Inside, remnants of food wrappers, a rusted lantern, a child's drawing of a tree with black shapes hanging from its branches. But no bodies. No people. No answers. Part 9, The Rusk Files. Professor Howard Rusk lived alone in a weather-beaten farmhouse near the Canadian border. Marla drove out on a gray Thursday morning, accompanied by Deputy Carrick. The trees along the roadside leaned heavy with late autumn rain, and fog hung low over the hills. Rusk was in his late 70s now, thin, skeletal, with eyes that didn't blink often. He greeted them calmly, as if expecting their visit. His voice was dry but articulate. He refused to let them inside. "I taught mythology, detective," he said. "Stories. Patterns. You're confusing metaphor with reality." "We found symbols in multiple locations linked to your former students," Marla said. "We found journals, drawings, missing people." He looked at her, then off into the trees. "I warned them not to go deep." "Go where?" "To the hollow," he said. "There are places even maps avoid." They pressed him, but he refused further comment. Just before they left, he handed Marla a box. "For your collection," he said. Inside were folders, class notes, essays, attendance lists. One folder was labeled Field Study, May 1986, 4 days in Black Hollow. The list of students included Lena Braith, Charles Nels, a student named Victor Amaze, never previously mentioned, and Rusk himself. Attached was a handwritten summary of the trip. It described several nights spent camping near Echo Rock, observing folkloric behavior patterns. Students were tasked with mapping symbolic placements in the landscape. One line stood out, underlined twice. The girl heard the knocking first. Part 10, Whisper Ridge. Weeks passed. The case reached national media. News outlets ran headlines like Vermont Vanishings, The Woods That Swallow. Podcasts dissected the photographs. Online forums exploded with conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, satanic cults, alien abductions. None of it helped. But then, a tip came in from a retired forest ranger named Ed Morell. "I know that cave," he said, pointing to the photograph labeled, "They let us eat once the snow melted." "I've been there. Back in '95, tracking a cougar. It's near Whisper Ridge. Place gave me the creeps." He described a natural granite shelf, about 4 miles southeast of the dried streambed. Said he remembered carvings, deep gouges in the stone. Marla and a small team set out that weekend. The area was remote, accessible only by hiking 2 hours from the nearest forest road. They reached the cave just before dusk. It matched the photo exactly. Inside, narrow passageways, cool air. No signs of recent occupation. But then they found the room. An inner chamber, partially collapsed, contained scorched rocks, old bones, and something far more disturbing, an iron rod bent into the shape of a spiral. Near it, buried under a thin layer of soil, lay a human tooth. DNA testing confirmed it belonged to Claire Holloway. Part 11, Claire's Return. It happened suddenly, 8 months and 4 days after the students vanished. A 911 call came in from a gas station outside of Berlin, Vermont. A young woman, dirty, barefoot, barely conscious, had stumbled in and collapsed. She had no ID, but muttered the words, "Tell my dad. I'm not gone." It was Claire. Thin. Dehydrated. Scratches across her arms and legs. Her hair was matted with leaves and ash. Her vitals were unstable. She was rushed to a hospital under police escort. When Marla saw her the next day, Claire barely spoke. "Where's Elliot?" she asked once. She flinched at any mention of the forest. When shown the Polaroids, she grew pale and whispered, "That's not all of them. There were others." Claire told only fragments. They had found a door deep in the woods. They had crossed through something, not a wall, not a cave, more like a crease. Elliot had gone first. Claire followed. She couldn't explain what happened afterward. Time was wrong. She remembered something waking up beneath the floor. She escaped, she thought, because it let her go. Her therapist called her recollections highly dissociative trauma responses. But Marla didn't believe it was all hallucination. Too much matched what they'd found. Part 12, The Map That Wasn't. While Claire recovered under heavy security, Marla returned to the files from Rusk's box. She found a drawing in the back of one of the essays, hand-drawn topography of Black Hollow. Except, it didn't match any official USGS map. It showed additional trails. An extra ridge. Symbols drawn into the trees. Some matching the ones Elliot sketched in his journal. At the bottom, written faintly in pencil. "They can only reach you where the world forgets itself." Marla scanned the map into her laptop, ran overlays with satellite data. One location stood out, a narrow gully that didn't exist on any official document but showed up faintly on LiDAR scans. An anomaly. When she sent a team to investigate, they found stone stairs descending into the earth. Just 15 feet down, they ended at a wall covered in carvings. One of them, a name. ED. Carved by hand. Fresh. Part 13, Patient 113. The facility was called Brookpine Institute, tucked into a wooded region outside Montpelier. Officially, it specialized in long-term psychiatric care. But Marla had uncovered a sealed court record from 2004 referencing a patient housed there, an ED found wandering near Black Hollow, incoherent, malnourished, and speaking in archaic-sounding fragments. The patient had no ID, but staff referred to him as Patient 113. Over the years, he became docile, refused to speak to anyone except for a former nurse named Olivia Bain, now retired and living in Maine. Marla tracked her down. He was afraid of corners, Olivia said. Used to push his bed into the center of the room. Wouldn't let the shadows touch him. She handed Marla a collection of sketches he'd drawn over the years. Dozens of them, crude, jagged, frantic. They all showed the same thing, a forest with one bent tree, a black doorway cut into the ground, and a tall, faceless figure standing in the distance. In one of the drawings, a name was scrawled in the corner. Elliot. Marla returned to the institute. With court authorization, she was allowed 1 hour with Patient 113. He was in his late 30s, though his medical file estimated him to be barely 25. Long hair, eyes sunken. He stared at Marla for a long time before speaking. "They fed us wrong time," he said. "Not food. Not days. They gave us hours. We were hungry for sun. It doesn't come there." Marla asked where there was. He said nothing. But before she left, he whispered. "We knocked, and they answered. We asked, and they came. Not their fault." Part 14, The Bent Tree. Guided by Patient 113's drawings, Marla and the search team hiked again into Black Hollow, searching for the bent tree. For 3 days, they mapped ridgelines, used heat imaging, metal detectors, and drone surveys. On the 4th morning, they found it. A lone birch, split at its midpoint, bowed unnaturally as if snapped by massive pressure but still alive. It stood at the edge of a shallow depression, choked with moss and roots. And there, at its base, they found stones forming a ring. Inside it, bones, long buried, partially unearthed by rain. Human remains. 2 separate individuals. One was eventually identified as Victor Amaze, the unlisted student from the 1986 field study with Professor Rusk. The other? No match in any known database. No dental records. No DNA match. Just a ring on the third finger of the left hand, silver, hand-etched, bearing a symbol identical to the one found in Eliot's journal, 3 concentric circles with a vertical slash through the center. Part 15, Recurrence. Claire, still under observation, began to draw. Not speak, draw. The same tree. The same doorway. The same figure. When shown patient 113 sketches, she recoiled. He was there, she whispered. He didn't last long. A new pattern emerged. For other people in the last 15 years had been picked up in areas bordering Black Hollow. Each was found in an altered mental state, mute or nonsensical. All had been institutionalized. 2 of them had also drawn the doorway. One of them, a man named Terence Quill, had been painting the same shape for months, an impossible corridor leading downward, narrowing until it became a pinhole. Each painting bore a number in the corner. Always the same. 3.7.4. Part 16, The Sound Beneath. After weeks of radio silence, the Vermont Search and Rescue Team made an unscheduled report. Deep beneath Whisper Ridge, ground-penetrating radar had detected something unexpected, a large rectangular cavity, nearly 40 feet underground, framed by stone. Not a natural formation. Artificial. Permission was granted to begin excavation. But before they could begin, the forest seemed to turn. First, a rash of animal deaths. Deer, raccoons, birds, dead near the edges of the excavation zone, without wounds. Then, electrical failures. Equipment drained unexpectedly. GPS units scrambled. Marla herself began to experience it. Static whispers on her voice recorder when alone. Footsteps behind her in the woods. At night, dreams of a descending staircase with no end. Still, the dig began. On the 7th day, they broke through. A single square chamber, dry, lined with obsidian-colored stone. In the center, an altar. And behind it, carved into the back wall, the unmistakable figure from every drawing. Tall. Faceless. Arms outstretched. Below it, 7 names. 6 worn away by time. 1 still legible. Claire Holloway. Part 17, The 7th Name. The inscription inside the obsidian chamber was older than the rocks surrounding it. Carbon dating was inconclusive. Geological analysis from the University of Massachusetts couldn't identify the black stone. It wasn't obsidian. It wasn't volcanic. One geologist described it as synthetic, but pre-industrial. Like someone tried to invent stone. The 7 names below the figure were carved with astonishing precision. Claire Holloway's name was the only one not eroded by time. Why was her name there? Who carved it? Was this chamber meant to be a tomb or a registry? One theory emerged: the names belonged to those who had crossed. Another, it was a warning. Part 18, Rusk's Final Note. Professor Howard Rusk was found dead 3 days after news of the chamber broke. Heart failure, the coroner said. Natural causes. But in his mailbox, authorities found a package addressed to Detective Marla Heller, "If I am no longer breathing." Inside, a tape cassette and a series of handwritten pages, yellowed with age. They were right. The old stories, the original myths, were never about gods or demons. They were warnings. They mapped where not to go. The hollow is not evil, but it is ancient. And it listens. He described the 1986 field study in greater detail. How one student, Victor Amaze, claimed he saw a mirror under the earth. He walked into a crevice and was gone for hours. When he came back, he was different. Detached. Quiet. A week after they returned to campus, Amaze disappeared. No one ever saw him again. Rusk wrote. The students brought something back. A thinness. A crack. We opened it further. Part 19, The Disappearance. The excavation team, now numbering 11 people, worked in rotating shifts. Deputy Carrick remained on-site most nights, overseeing security. One night, at 2:11 a.m., the team lead, geologist Alex Byrne, stepped into the chamber with a thermal scanner. His assistant, Tanya Wu, waited outside. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. When she called his name, there was no reply. Tanya entered the chamber. Alex Byrne was gone. His gear lay where he'd set it. His flashlight rested against the altar, still on. His notebook was open on the floor. The last sentence he'd written. The stone is humming. Search teams combed the forest. No tracks. No blood. No sign of exit. Thermal scans showed nothing. Drones lost GPS signal near the treeline. Byrne never came back. Tanya quit the project the next morning. Part 20, The Recurring Pattern. With increasing desperation, Marla turned to history. She found 4 other cases in North American history involving remote disappearances tied to universities and woodland areas. Middletown, 1911, 4 archaeology students disappeared while surveying native burial mounds. No bodies found. One journal recovered contained a sketch nearly identical to the faceless figure. Arkansas, 1948, 3 anthropologists vanished near the Ozarks. Their last letter spoke of a room under the rocks, where time doesn't move. Oregon, 1973, a grad student studying moss growth in old caves reported symbols whispering through the walls. 2 days later, he was found catatonic, never recovered speech. Vermont, 1986, the Rusk Incident. In each case, drawings matched the ones from Claire, patient 113, and the others. Part 21, Claire Breaks Silence. Claire Holloway had begun to speak again. Her voice was slow, her eyes always moving. But the words came. We weren't the first, she said. We followed echoes. That's what Eliot called them, soft places in the world. He found one in the library, a journal hidden behind the ventilation panel in the 3rd-floor archive. The police searched. Inside the wall behind an old vent, they found a leather-bound book, warped and faded, with the initials ED inside. It was a journal. Eliot's. Dozens of entries. Descriptions of symbols, locations, dreams. And near the end, a terrifying sketch, a room made of dark stone, a triangle of people standing before a slit in the wall. Each figure held a tooth in their hand. Underneath, he had written. The trade is always made with something living. Part 22, The Language of the Hollow. With help from a linguist at MIT, the strange symbols found in the cave-in journals were analyzed. They didn't match any known script, but the structure resembled proto-language formations. Each symbol corresponded to a gesture, as if meant to be read with the body. Marla asked Claire. Claire nodded. Slowly, she demonstrated one. Her hands curved inward, fingers twisting. It looked unnatural. Painful. As she finished the motion, a sound occurred in the corner of the hospital room. A chair, wooden, untouched, creaked once, sharply. No one else had moved. Part 23, The Spiral. The spiral symbol, the one burned into the cave wall, marked in the journals, etched into the ring on the unknown skeleton, was finally traced. An archaic symbol known in ancient Basque folklore, found on boundary stones to mark thresholds of the dead. It didn't symbolize death itself. It symbolized the passage through. When Marla returned to the chamber under the ridge, she stood at the altar. Looked again at the 7 names. A thin hairline crack had appeared in the wall beneath them. Something had shifted. Part 24, Call from the Hollow. At 3:17 a.m., Detective Marla Heller's phone rang. Caller ID, unknown. But the number, 802-93X-75 times 2, matched one in the original case file. Simon Brooks. One of the 5 students who vanished. Marla answered. There was only static at first. Then, faint breathing. And then, a voice. A whisper. We're not gone. But the world we see now, it doesn't remember light. Click. The call ended. The phone company confirmed the call pinged off a now decommissioned tower near Whisper Ridge, inside the exclusion zone. But Simon's phone was never recovered. Part 25, Claire remembers the door. After the phone call, Marla returned to Claire's room. She showed her the number. Claire flinched. He stayed behind, she said. He was the one who knocked. She described a night, months ago, when Elliot, Simon, and the others found a sinkhole behind the science building. They believed it connected to something older. Simon had been reading Elliot's journal obsessively. He spoke of resonance, of finding the correct tone that would loosen the seam. One night, Claire said, they stood in a circle and recited something from the journal. Nothing happened at first. Then the air turned heavy. And one by one, things began to change. The woods moved, she said. They bent toward us. That's when Claire ran. The others stayed. Part 26, 2 more gone. On April 4, 2 officers, Deputy Lisa Merrill and Forest Tech Jonah Keene, were assigned to a 24-hour watch rotation on the perimeter of the Whisper Ridge dig. At 2:41 a.m., their last radio message, movement in the trees. No animals. No lights. They were never heard from again. When the search team arrived, they found both of their vehicles undisturbed. Merrill's jacket hung neatly on the mirror of her patrol car. Jonah's boots were still dry, placed beside his tent. One item had appeared, however, that no one could explain. A flat stone, about the size of a dinner plate, resting at the campfire ring. Etched into it. A perfect spiral. Part 27, the journal's final pages. Elliot's journal had been heavily damaged, but a few final pages were salvageable. One page described a point beyond certainty. It isn't a place, it's a frequency. Like the eye of a thought. When you tune into it, things see you back. Another described an old ritual from the Northeast tribes, stories passed down of the Watchers in the Hollow. These stories were warnings never to build on certain types of rock. One final entry, barely legible, read. If we give it one, it doesn't take more. But if you lie, it takes until it's satisfied. Part 28, Hollow Static. Back at the chamber, investigators installed remote audio sensors and motion-activated video. Over the course of 4 nights, only one event triggered the camera. At 3:06 a.m., the mic recorded a deep vibration, too low to hear without equipment, followed by a voice. Multiple analysts reviewed the audio. The results varied. Some heard, "Don't open again." Others claimed it said, "Join us inside." The waveform, when analyzed, formed a spiral. Part 29, the final map. Claire provided one last drawing. A map, not of physical land, but of the way in. It showed overlapping circles, staircases, mirrored corridors, and a final chamber shaped like an eye. At the bottom, a single word was written in red ink. Eschery. No one knew what it meant. Until one linguist cross-referenced ancient Proto-Celtic roots. A combination of echo, and realm. Realm of echoes. That night, a local hiker, unaware of the investigation, reported hearing a man calling his name from beneath a dry riverbed. The hiker's name? Jonah. One of the vanished officers. Part 30, The Tunnel Beneath. The final major breakthrough came when seismic sensors picked up a faint collapse below the original chamber. It revealed a sloped corridor leading deeper. A secondary chamber. Inside, hundreds of small handprints along the walls. Most human. Some not. And carved into the center of the floor, the same spiral symbol. In the center of it, a single tooth. Human. Recent. DNA matched Simon Brooks. Part 31, The Voice Journal. A week after the second chamber was discovered, investigators recovered an old digital recorder buried near the Whisper Ridge trailhead. It was wrapped in plastic, sealed inside a weathered hiking boot. The voice belonged to Elliot Dunn. This is day 3, I think. I'm not sure. There's no sun here. Only pulse. I hear things move above. Not animals. Something older. It speaks in images. Dreams. He sounded lucid at first. Then erratic. We were wrong. It doesn't need permission. It just waits. Waits for sound. For thoughts shaped like doors. He ends the recording by whispering one phrase repeatedly. Eschery is not beneath. Eschery is behind. Part 32, The Seventh Name. In the dig records, something peculiar was noted about the names carved in the obsidian room. 6 were partially eroded. Only Claire Holloway's name was untouched. But when the surface was scanned with LiDAR, a 7th name, one not visible to the naked eye, appeared faintly beneath the spiral. Dunn E. Claire, upon seeing the scan, collapsed into a panic attack. It took hours for her to speak again. When she did, she simply said, "He promised he'd come back. But he didn't mean to us." Part 33, The Spiral Room. In the lowest known level of the underground complex, investigators discovered a strange room, shaped like an eye with a raised platform in the center. All sound within the room was dampened unnaturally. Voices fell flat. Equipment failed. And in the center of the platform was a shape like a chair, carved of the same black knot stone. Facing a smooth section of wall that curved slightly inward, like a screen. On that wall was etched, again, the spiral, but this time, with something new at the center. A figure. Thin. Bent. Arms too long. Faceless. The same image from the drawings. From the journal. From the dreams. Part 34, The Static Ceremony. Audio collected from the site's third mic began to form patterns. Low-frequency pulses. Marla sent it to an acoustics expert. The verdict: this isn't natural. It's a designed signal. A loop. Possibly a language. When the loop was played backwards at half speed, a word seemed to emerge over and over. Bryn. Not bring. Not burn. Bryn. When analyzed linguistically, it matched nothing. But in an obscure folklore dictionary from 1891, Marla found a similar word in an Appalachian folktale. Bryn, the calling from the mirrored earth, whose name is known by those who never left the dreaming ground. Part 35, The Missing Tooth. The human tooth found in the spiral was conclusively identified as belonging to Simon Brooks. But he had no dental issues reported prior to vanishing. When the forensic team examined the tooth further, they found something chilling. Microfractures around the base indicated the tooth had been extracted while the person was still alive. No signs of decay or age. Moreover, the enamel had faint carvings on it. Under microscopic view, a spiral, and a single vertical line cutting through it. Claire identified it immediately. "That's the return mark," she whispered. "The one you carve when you want to come back." Part 36, The Knock. At 3:43 a.m. on April 22, Claire Holloway awoke in her hospital room to a sound she had not heard since the night she fled the woods. 3 soft knocks. From inside the wall. She began to scream. Security arrived within minutes. They searched the room, nothing. Until a nurse noticed a panel in the wall had loosened slightly. Maintenance opened it. Inside, a small cavity in the plaster, lined with faint black dust. And something else. A second audio recorder. Identical to the one found outside. It, too, belonged to Elliot Dunn. Part 37, The Whisper Map. The second recorder was more fragmented. It contained breathing. Distant voices, like water dripping through a pipe. And then Elliot's voice again. "If you found this, I'm in the third layer now. Don't come further. You'll see copies. They aren't us." He described a map drawn in veins along the walls, glowing faintly when touched. At the end of the message, Elliot says something haunting. "We made a door with our thoughts. But it already had a key." Part 38, The Forest Bends. Multiple hikers reported an unusual phenomenon. Certain trees along Whisper Ridge appeared to bend slightly, not in wind, but toward sound. Birdsong. A radio. A human voice. Forest officials sent a drone. It captured images of trees forming an unnatural semicircle pattern near the dig site. In the center of the formation, a perfect circle of grass, pressed flat. Within the circle, the grass had turned a dull gray. Part 39, The Reversal. Linguist Dr. Marcy Feldman discovered something terrifying when she reversed the spiral symbols in Claire's notebook and overlaid them onto a map of the original college campus. Each point aligned with one of the 5 students' final known locations. Claire confirmed the implication. "We never left. We just reversed." Part 40, The Final Voice. 2 days later, Marla received one final transmission, this time, through the emergency services radio frequency, which had been dormant since the dig site was shut down. A male voice. No static. Just words. "I can come back now. But I won't be alone." Then silence. The team traced the transmission. It didn't come from a cell tower. It came from beneath the chamber. Part 41, Collapse Beneath. On April 25, at exactly 4:11 a.m., seismic monitors around the Whisper Ridge exclusion zone registered a sharp underground event, a localized collapse centered on the second chamber. The entire corridor that led to the spiral platform caved in. When response teams reached the dig site, they discovered a wide fissure had opened, exhaling a sulfurous stench. The chamber floor had dropped nearly 12 feet. Dust hung in the air like fog. But something else had happened. The spiral symbol in the center had changed. Where once it was flat and smooth, now the spiral was deeply etched, and at its core, a new addition. A single, carved eye, staring straight up. Camera footage prior to the collapse showed no such feature. It had appeared sometime in the hours after the seismic event. A forensic geologist noted that the carving appeared to be older than the collapse itself. "It's as if it's always been there, and the floor simply revealed it." Part 42, The Year That Disappeared. Following the collapse, Marla Heller requested archival geological and local law enforcement records dating back over a century. She was searching for any patterns, missing persons, cave-ins, strange environmental shifts. She found something odd in the 1911 ledger from Bracken County, the jurisdiction that included Whisper Ridge at the time. An entire month was missing from the journal. No entries between August 9 and September 16. No incidents reported. No weather logged. No handwritten notes. Just blank, yellowed paper. And in the margin of the last available page before the silence, someone had written in pencil. The earth took them. The quiet place opened again. We built over its voice, and it waited. It was signed with 3 initials, RMC. Further investigation into county archives led to a related file, tucked inside an old folder labeled July Flood Casualties. In it, 14 missing names, all students at a summer college program hosted on the same ridge, now the land where the current college stands. Not one of those students had ever been found. Part 43, The Name Beneath Names. Claire Holloway, now recovering at a secure hospital in New Hampshire, asked to see the list of the 14 students from 1911. She stared at it silently, tracing her fingers over the faded ink. Then she said one name aloud, the only one she claimed to recognize. Elora May Cavan. When asked how she knew that name, Claire responded. I used to see it. At the foot of my bed. Before we ever went into the woods. It turned out Elora May Cavan was 19 when she vanished. A student of folklore and music. Her personal belongings were recovered years later in a dry riverbed south of the ridge, including a leather-bound hymnal. Within the hymnal, handwritten lyrics for a song titled Esheris Calling. The first stanza read, When the light forgets your name, walk the woods and sing the same. Let no mirror steal your face, or you'll return without a place. Part 44, The Screaming Room. Following the collapse of the chamber, investigators halted all excavations. But overnight security footage caught a new anomaly. A guard stationed outside the perimeter vanished on camera. At exactly 2:39 a.m., he stepped off screen to relieve himself behind a parked truck. He never came back. Seconds later, the camera began picking up audio, a chorus of overlapping whispers, none identifiable. The next morning, when search teams combed the area, they found the guard's utility belt lying in a circle of ash, but no burn marks anywhere else. No footprints. The area was surrounded by symbols carved into the dirt, spirals within spirals, like tangled worms. One of the spirals was moving faintly, due to air being pulled into the soil. Ground-penetrating radar showed the presence of a void, a large, round, vertical shaft, almost 50 meters deep. At the bottom, what appeared to be another room. Part 45, The Vaulted Room. With great caution, a remote submersible camera was lowered into the void. At 32 meters, the signal flickered. The screen glitched. But for 5 seconds, the camera caught a perfect frame, a chamber with smooth walls, polished like obsidian. No entrances or exits. Just a space. And in the center, a figure, unmoving. The figure resembled a human form. But its proportions were wrong. Arms hung too long. Legs slightly bowed. Its head tilted in a way that suggested it was listening. Most disturbing, it stood inside a circle of candles, none of which had gone out. The footage ended abruptly with a burst of static. When reviewed in negative, something else became visible on the chamber wall. Dozens of handprints, all facing inward. Part 46, The Archivist's Warning. Just days later, Marla received an unmarked envelope at her temporary office. Inside, a photocopy of a handwritten letter, dated October 1922, from the files of the long-defunct New England Occult Inquiry Board. The letter, written by an anonymous field archivist, stated, "The spiral that calls is not a symbol. It is an instruction. The act of drawing it, especially in blood or thought, opens resonance. If found among students, it may mean one has already crossed. The final line was underlined 3 times. Once it recognizes you, it will follow. Even through silence. Part 47, Claire speaks in 2 voices. On April 30th, Claire Holloway suffered a seizure during a psychological evaluation. Her heart rate spiked. Brainwave activity became erratic. And during the episode, her voice changed. Witnesses report her speaking in 2 distinct voices at once. One was hers. The other was deeper, distant, almost submerged. Recordings of the event were analyzed. They contained a phrase repeated 7 times. She promised me a door. She drew it in her sleep. After the episode, Claire had no memory of the event, but she began to draw obsessively. She filled 8 sketchbooks in 36 hours. Every page was the same image. A tree, split down the middle, with a spiral where its heart should be. Beneath it, a figure standing with no shadow. Part 48, the tape from 1969. A month after the collapse, Marla Heller received a tip from an anonymous archivist at St. Jude's Monastery in Vermont. They had uncovered a reel-to-reel audio tape marked Lena Marsh, July 3, 1969. It had been sealed in a box labeled Field Recordings, Confessionals, Do Not Play Without Clerical Oversight. Lena Marsh had been a college junior attending a philosophy summer retreat in Whisper Ridge. She vanished during a nighttime hike and was never found. On the tape, Lena's voice is whispery, urgent, at times fragmented. At first I thought it was just a cave, but it wasn't. It folded backward, like breath turning inside out. I saw them. Not dead. Not alive. Just held. Held in thought, like paused dreams. Later in the tape, her voice becomes distorted, overlapping with something else, an echo that doesn't match her cadence. The final words are delivered in a second, guttural tone. She drew it for us. The door. The twin spiral. But some of us looked behind it. Then silence. The magnetic tape ends with a sound like stone grinding over wet earth. Part 49, Students Reappearing. On May 17, at 3:12 a.m., a highway patrol officer in southern Maine reported a barefoot young woman walking down the median of I-95, wrapped in what appeared to be a college dormitory bedsheet. The woman was identified through dental records as Naomi Vree, one of the missing students. She was emaciated, mute, and her skin was ice-cold, despite warm weather. Hospital scans revealed she had no memory of the past 8 months, and her cells showed signs of deep cryogenic trauma, as if she'd been preserved in sub-zero temperatures. But no frostbite. No organ damage. Inside her clenched hand, a twig, bent in the shape of a spiral. When shown pictures of her dorm room and friends, Naomi responded only to one image, the chalk spiral on the classroom wall. She began to cry and said one sentence. He stayed behind to keep the door open. Part 50, Spiral Resonance. The return of Naomi triggered an emergency academic summit, but most students were kept in the dark. However, across campus, students began reporting dreams again. More vivid. More synchronized. Several sketched similar images. A hollow staircase descending into a throat-like cavern. A woman in a blindfold holding a cracked mirror. A door without hinges, made of bark and bone. One student, physics undergrad Matthew Jane, began to draw mathematical spirals over his notes, saying he couldn't stop. He claimed, "It's like the equation writes itself. The spiral is recursive, it's not just a shape. It's a system. A language with no origin." He disappeared the next day. His dorm room was found ice cold. On the wall, a new spiral, carved into the plaster. Blood under his fingernails. Part 51, The Fifth Chamber. Radar scans from the collapsed chamber revealed something that had gone unnoticed. Below the second chamber, and separate from the vertical shaft, was a hidden fifth space, reachable only by a narrowing vertical tunnel sealed with calcite. Excavation resumed under strict containment. It took 2 days to breach the chamber. Inside, silence. It was a perfect dome, lined with black stone that absorbed all light. No carvings. No symbols. Only a pedestal in the center, and on it, a journal, bound in rotted leather. Inside the journal, pages written in at least 6 different handwritings, spanning more than a century. The first entry was dated 1874. The last, April 2, 2024. The most recent handwriting matched Claire Holloway. She had never seen the journal before. Her final entry read: "They are not taking us. We are being unspooled. Thought first. Memory second. Body last. Once you see her face, you are already part of the spiral." Part 52, Claire's disappearance. On May 19, Claire Holloway vanished from her hospital room without triggering a single alarm. Security footage showed her standing up at 3:44 a.m., walking to the corner of the room, and vanishing mid-step. No transition. No flicker. One frame she's there, the next, gone. In her bed, a spiral made of her own hair, carefully arranged on the pillow. Psychological analysts, FBI agents, and folklorists gathered to review every note, every tape, every drawing Claire had made. And one conclusion rose again and again. She was mapping something. But it wasn't geographical. It was spatial, between thoughts. Part 53, The Whispering Forest. The forest surrounding Whisper Ridge was sealed after a second patrol officer went missing. But on the final recorded drone flyover before the ban, investigators spotted something. A clearing in the center of the woods, perfectly circular, which had not existed in any previous maps. In the center, 13 figures, standing motionless, forming a spiral. They were dressed in tattered versions of university clothing from different decades, 1970s, 1980s, 1990s. Drone footage failed to show facial detail. The faces were all blurred by an unknown distortion. The spiral they formed was identical to the one found in the second chamber. And in the dead center stood a tall figure in white. When analysts enhanced the image, they noticed something chilling. The face of the central figure appeared to match a 1907 photograph of Elora May Cavan. Part 54, The Spiral Clock. 2 days after the drone recording, Marla Heller returned to the campus chapel. She sat alone in the small side alcove where the spiral had first been sketched on the chalkboard, 8 months ago. This time, she brought the journal recovered from the fifth chamber. Inside its pages, Claire had drawn a diagram labeled Spiral Clock. It showed a looping figure 8, crossing itself every 22 years. At each crosspoint, a disappearance. 2028. Only the last date hadn't happened yet. But that wasn't true anymore. Because according to a recent calendar shift due to leap year drift, the crosspoint had already occurred, on May 17, 2025. The same night Naomi returned. The same night the new spiral clearing formed in the forest. Part 55, The Inside Spiral. Several new details emerged. Naomi Vree, now in care, began speaking again. She described a chamber made of voices, where thoughts echoed so long they became real. She said she saw others there, but their faces were unfinished, like memories not fully formed. She said, "They told me I was only here because someone else gave up their turn." And when asked who, she replied, "The boy with the red thread. He stayed." Later, in old police archives from 1972, a missing student from the same town was described as wearing a red friendship bracelet. His name, Evan Heller. Marla's uncle. She had never known him. Part 56, The Letters. In a locked box inside a chapel vault, Claire's personal effects were found. Among them, letters written in charcoal on handmade pulp sheets and signed, but in familiar handwriting. They were addressed to someone named the Keeper. One line stood out in each. "If I go willingly. I only ask that you leave the rest. If this is a mirror, let me break it. If the spiral unspools, follow the line inward, not outward." Each letter ended with a single phrase repeated. "Don't let it start again." But it already had. Part 57, Return of the Others. Over the next 6 days, 3 more students were found. In a boat off the coast of Nova Scotia. On the steps of a burned-down church in Michigan. Walking barefoot into a desert town in Arizona. All 3 bore the same spiral symbol, either burned into their skin or sewn into their clothing. None remembered the others. All said the same sentence in separate interviews. "She is not the door. She is the keyhole." Investigators began referring to the spiral as the pattern that sees. Part 58, Marla's Decision. Marla had spent the last 8 months chasing the mystery from the outside. Now, she believed the only way forward was inward. She returned to the site of the collapse, now sealed under concrete and armed guard. But at 4:14 a.m., the cameras outside the facility glitched. And Marla was gone. No breach, no signs of entry. Only her journal, left at the base of the wall, open to the final page. "If this is my echo, I want it to reach you. I want the line to stop with me." She signed it. MH, May 25, 2025. Part 59, The New Class. 6 months later, in November, the university quietly reopened. A new group of freshmen arrived. Among them was a girl named Cambria Lore, who had never heard of the disappearances. During orientation, she wandered into a side hall of the chapel. The janitor was replacing old chalkboards. One board had a faint spiral outline, almost scrubbed away. Cambria felt strangely drawn to it. That night, she dreamed of a stone chamber filled with books with no titles, and voices speaking backward. In the morning, she found a note on her pillow, written in unfamiliar handwriting. "This time, we remember." Part 60, The Spiral Never Ends. 2 years later, Cambria vanished on the same date the original students had. Her dorm was undisturbed. Her laptop left open on a half-written essay. On her mirror, a new spiral. This one had 2 centers. For the first time, investigators began to consider a new theory. Maybe the spiral doesn't take. Maybe it recruits. Epilogue, The Spiral Record. In the final months of the investigation, a sound technician played the 1969 Lena Marsh tape at 1/4 speed. Hidden in the low frequencies, a second voice, undetectable at normal speed, repeated the same sentence. "You're only lost if you want to go back." The spiral had been here before. It would be again. And someone, somewhere, was always listening.